Welcome back to Call Me by Your Game, the podcast where I, your host, Connor McCabe, bring on a guest to hear from them about a meaningful or memorable video game from a particular moment in their life. On the show, you'll know, if you listen, that we talk as much about what made playing that game special and memorable to our guest as we will get into the context of when and how they had this meaningful time with it. A little bit of housekeeping up top for the show is that if you want to support us, there's a million ways you can do that. Both myself and my guest are going to have stuff to plug today. So if you are listening to this in a podcast feed or watching this on YouTube in the future, then go ahead and look in the show notes. You're going to find just an absolute treasure trove of stuff to click on. And I know that you like clicking on stuff if you're anything like me. Most importantly, for the show, if you like the conversations I have with video games and you want to discover more bonus video game podcasts from me and a bunch of other fun people, you can go ahead and check us out on patreon.com/super NPC Radio, where, like I said, there's a ton of bonus stuff, including our current Mass Effect Games Club. We're going through the original Mass Effect game in a week-by-week format for this first quarter of the year. So if you like aliens and maybe trying to make whoopee with them, check out what we got going on there. That'll do it, though, for the housekeeping. And I'll finally get in and introduce our guest for today's episode. So please welcome improviser and one of the members of the Everything Now show, Chris Tcholakian.
Hello. Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. This is I get so many different feelings at the tops of these shows because I'm just, such an emotionally intuitive person. And the one I was having at this moment was a feeling that comes up often where by the time I've introduced our guest, we've already been hanging out for like 20 minutes and talking. So we sort of have that like for the audience, that introductory period, which is where we find ourselves now.
Yes. We'll probably repeat a lot of what we just said in the last 20 minutes, but that's what you got to do. That's
Yes,
showbiz.
and you know what? If we don't, I'll be so bummed if we don't. I want to hear it. I love repeats. I'm already nostalgic for the chat we had before we rolled. But Chris, I'm so glad that you could make it here and join me for the podcast today. I know you how I know the majority of the guests who joined me on this podcast through the Los Angeles improv comedy scene. And because I've met you quite recently and our I guess within the span of our lives, just making this more complicated than it needs to be, because I met you sort of recently. I do remember at least what I'm pretty sure was the first time we had a conversation, which was well, you were recently on a Lloyd team at the UCB Theater, Odyssey. We'll just
Yeah.
let that sink in. What an amazing game. Former guest of the show, Nikhil, I think like right before you all got on, he
Oh,
came on this
wow.
show. So I don't want to say that it was good luck, but if you don't get on another Lloyd team or a Herald team in the next couple months, it is my fault. But I remember just being in the back as we were getting ready to watch a show, and I recognized you because you had been at those meetings, and we just got to chatting. You knew Ben Wheatmartian, who's a mutual friend, but it not that you have to corroborate that being our first time having a conversation, but does it track for you so far?
I want to say our first time having a conversation was that like mixer event they did where
Oh,
we were
yes.
at that bar. I forget the name of it now. And I remember the Sacramento Kings were in the playoffs and you were very nervous about it. And we had
Oh
a
my
discussion
goodness.
about that. And
Yes.
I was like, the Knicks are also in the playoffs, and I'm very nervous about it.
Yes.
I believe that was the first full conversation you
Okay.
and I had.
And maybe our follow-up was this, sort of like side of the stage thing.
Yes, I remember that as well because I think I remember you the first time we talked, you were like, I'm going to the game or something like that, or I have to go home and watch the game and
Sure.
I'm willing to like leave early so I
Oh,
can go
sure.
watch the game. And out of curiosity, I think I looked the score and they'd lost pretty bad. And so the next time I saw you, I was like, hey man, how's it going? And you were like,
Yes.
yeah, it was brutal. It was rough. But I do remember
Yes.
that being on the side of UCB Franklin.
Just you consoling me
Yeah.
in this heartbreak. I think that makes sense. Yeah, because they definitely got the shit kicked out of them against the Warriors in that last game of the first round. And I'm glad we've already broken the seal on the sports talk.
Yeah,
So
yeah, we're already in it.
we're in it. But Chris, I know you, not just through the UCB theater, but you are one of the members of the Everything Now show, which I've been lucky to be on twice now. Um, I could talk about it being an amazing sort of chat-based Twitch comedy show that you all run, but what do you want to say about it? Who is Chris Tcholakian? You've got the floor, my friend.
Well, that's a very good description of it. Very, very succinct. I could I'm gonna maybe steal that. But
Oh, by all means.
basically we over the last 5+ years have
Dang.
been building this show to get it to, it has sort of had different iterations over that period, and I'd say in the last couple years it's become what it is now, which is like over a dozen different formats that we set the scenes in, and then heavily interactive where the audience can trigger things all throughout the show that informs the improv. It's kind of like a hybrid of short form and long form
Hmm.
because it sort of lives in a long form scene, but then they can kind of trigger short form games throughout
Yeah.
it. Um, and yeah, we do it 4 nights a week, which a lot of people say is a bad idea. It's too much.
A bad
And
idea only because of the time commitment, I'm sure, that it
yes,
takes for all
yes.
four of you. And it's not like you're only doing stuff for it that night. But Rob, honestly, I would assume a good idea for growing an audience and a show, especially with that consistency.
Yeah, you would think that would lead to some significant audience growth. Perhaps soon that'll happen. No, but we do have a very great audience. We have some regulars who I think are currently watching this on Twitch. We have we're very happy with what we've developed here. And yeah, that because it's 4 nights a week, that is most of what I do.
Yeah.
But I'm also an improviser. My Lloyd run has tragically
Mm,
ended, so now I'm just a guy around town again. But I did love doing that, and hopefully there will be more improv in my future.
absolutely.
Um, and trying to think of anything else. Those are the main things.
Killer.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope I'm sure there'll be more to come for you in some form or fashion. But yeah, Odyssey, not to harp on it too much, but Odyssey was such a great Lloyd team. Like if for those fortunately a lot of this listener base is used to me talking to people about improv and the fine details of how it functions in the UCB scene. So
Love
people
that.
probably know what mess hall is or Lloyd. It's just always nice to see any team, regardless of like what level it has, get slapped together and seemingly, again, from an outside perspective, seemingly like really gel and have a really great time.
Yeah, I mean we got super super lucky. For one, when they moved it from mess hall to Lloyd, there were only two Lloyd teams, or I
Yeah.
think there used to be six mess hall teams.
Something
So
crazy like that.
yeah, so we got way more attention. We were on after Harold, so we would also be Monday night. We weren't anyone deeply in the lore will know that the inner sanctum at UCB used to host the mess hall shows, and it was just this cavernous space that
Yes.
was really not conducive to improv. And so we got to just perform at Franklin, which is like the best stage. So we got super lucky there. And then I also just think we got thrown together, but we all immediately like gelled pretty great.
Yes.
Um, all really liked each other, liked performing with each other. I also think we had a fantastic coach in James Mannion, who I will
Oh
shout
man.
out, who was just so good at like making us get better at improv. Like he was just a very good coach, you know. He
Yes.
knew how to keep us on track, but also make sure we're having fun.
Yeah.
We learned so much through that 6 months. It was wild.
That's really cool. Not to turn it back to sports too much, but it is a great player or a great performer surely doesn't always make a great coach. but occasionally, whether it's sports or improv or you have, music, who knows, music people as they're I think scientifically called.
Yes,
Um,
yes, that's their title.
occasionally that people do make that transition really well, and so um, I don't want to say it's no surprise that James is a great coach, but like I'm really happy to hear it because he is such a great improviser. Period.
Yeah, yeah, he's fantastic. He's been on everything now a couple times too now, and is so funny. I mean,
Uh,
yeah,
the
he's
man.
amazing.
I
Yeah.
love that guy. He came on here to talk about RuneScape a couple years ago. Are
Wow.
you aware of RuneScape?
So vaguely, but it feels like the exact game that he would bring.
Yes. It's like it originally began as a really crude and I say crude not in like the content aspect, but like how awful it looked,
Hmm.
MMORPG that anybody could play in a browser. And yeah, it was some good stuff from Manian. Well, Chris, I'm sure we're going to learn more about you as we go throughout the show and talk about all things video games. But before we get into your general history with games, would you please introduce what you've brought on for today's main event and call me by your game?
Absolutely. So I have brought on the NHL video game series, I guess it would be called. I don't know if I'm the first guest to just go all of these games is my game, but the differences between them are so slight that I feel
Yes.
that they really do exist as just one game. It's not like Grand Theft Auto where you're getting these incredibly different like settings and everything. It's just like all right, it's the next season of NHL, but all
Yes.
the operation is completely the same. So I've brought on a game I started playing, I guess, in 2002.
Wow.
So yeah,
Very
so
cool.
I've brought on technically like 22 games.
Huge. I
Yeah.
think so. While you are the second person to bring on a series. Someone brought on The Sims as a series like
Okay. Yeah.
3.5 years ago at this point. Shout out to Liz Adams. You probably have brought on the most games in that collective,
Yeah.
22 compared to like four or something. Um, anyway, I'm so excited to hear from you about your time with the NHL series, later in the show during the main event. But let's get into your history with games. Do you remember the first time you like took an interest in a video game or early memories of that?
So I think I was kind of doing Twitch before Twitch in that I would watch my brother play video games, and that was
Yes.
my main. I have an older brother, and he would play all these one player games. I think like Jack and Daxter was a big one he
Mm,
would play a lot, but also we had an N64, so he would play Super Mario 64, things like
yeah.
that. Banjo Kazooie, I think, was one. And I would just sort of watch him play these games and never even attempt to play it myself. And
Out
I would
of
just be
out of
like,
fear or
I think I was like, this is a chance to hang out with my brother. And if I start playing it, he's not going to stay and watch me play it, you know?
yes.
So I was like, I would rather just hang out with him and watch him play it. And also, he was much better than me at them all since he played and I didn't. So it was
Yes.
kind of like, why don't I just watch him play?
Totally. All of this logic tracks, especially it seems like a bit of a rite of passage for a younger sibling who like likes their older sibling.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And we did have some two-player games. We played Mario Kart, Mario Party, the Pokemon Stadium games were big.
Mm,
We played a lot of the Pokemon
dude,
Stadium games.
could talk about those for a while. Love them.
Yeah,
The mini
yeah.
games are just a hoot.
Yes, we really would just sometimes play the mini game. You know the one, I forget if it's one or two, where you're Clefairy and you're catching the eggs.
Oh, I
We used
think
to,
the eggs one is two because in the first one, Clefairy is like a teacher in a classroom.
that's right, and you have to do the like weird movements.
Yeah.
Yes. We used to do the eggs one. We were both getting 100% every time, just sort of dead-eyed, just like hitting the things back and forth. But yeah, we had PlayStation 2, Nintendo 64, and a Dreamcast.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and the Dreamcast I remember loving. We used to play Pen Racing. I don't know if you've ever heard of that game.
You are telling me something, you're revealing this to me for the first time. I've never heard of it.
It was basically, I don't even know. I guess it was sort of like a Mario Kart, but instead of cars, you were just like an animal and you would just
Uh-huh.
like slide or run. through some level, but we used to play that a ton. We played a game called Cell Damage. Um,
You
but
could really be making all these up, and I
I
would just believe
know.
you.
Yeah, yeah. It's also like all flooding back to me right now, and
Yeah,
just like, what else did we play?
it's gonna happen throughout the episode, just
I'm
as a heads
sure,
up.
I'm
Yeah.
sure. But and then of course the game I almost brought on, and everything now regulars will know, is Dynasty Warriors 3, which was a
Oh,
game I played extensively.
wow.
Never had one or two. I think we had 3 and 5, but even 5, I was like, it's been bastardized. It's not what it should be, which is
Yes,
3, which was just because it's the one I had first. I was like, that's the best one.
totally. Can you tell
Um,
me a little bit, since it was one you were considering, like talk a little bit about this game and like what you remember about playing it?
so I remember it was the first like game that wasn't like Mario Party that I played. It was
Oh,
the
sure.
first game that wasn't just like, hey, it's like kind of a series of video mini games, or it's like a racing game. Like there's sort of a complex operation going on here.
Yes.
And it's about like third century feudal China and like
Hmm.
the warring kingdoms. And I didn't realize that it was based on actual history. I
Yes,
was
yeah.
just like, oh wow, this is very weirdly detailed. And then I think in like sixth or seventh grade, we learned about it in history, and I was like, "Why? What? I know all of this already. That's crazy." And I was like, "It was like the best test scores I ever got," because I was
Yeah,
just like, I kind of have been learning about this for like 5 years without
yeah.
realizing it.
So is the next
Um,
curriculum gonna be on Clefairy?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
I think I'd
yeah,
do really well.
yeah. Is that actually a real thing somewhere? Because I would kill that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was playing that one. That was probably the first like longer form video game I played
sure.
alone, and I would get really into that.
Do you
Um,
you know Sam D from Headbutt?
yeah, I don't think I've met him, but I know
Yes.
of him from watching.
Well, if you meet and you are feeling, confident enough to bring up video games, Sam is a big Dynasty Warriors fan. He's number 4, so you guys could kind of be a
Oh,
great pair of 3 and
interesting.
4. Yeah.
Because I had 3 and 5, so I actually missed 4. I
I
wonder if 4 was the secret best one.
think Sam might just be your missing puzzle piece of that information.
Wow. Okay. There's
Sorry to
also part of me
sidetrack you on
that's
that.
no, no, no. There's part of me that's like I should stay away from Dynasty Warriors because
Yeah.
I'll never, if I get into it, I'll never come out of it,
Hmm. For sure.
Um, but I'll definitely talk to him about that. Very few people know about Dynasty Warriors in my
Yes.
experience. But yeah, that was like the PlayStation 2 game I played all the time. And then of course, this is all secondary to the NHL games, which
Oh,
I
of course.
played.
Yes.
And then
We'll just
in
assume
high
that's going on
school,
this whole time.
yeah, yeah. And in high school, my friends all played FIFA. So we would
Mm.
play FIFA together, but they were all way better at it than me. So I was always like, when we would play 2v2, it was like, which of you is the best? I'll be on your team. I'll just kind of pass it to you and like let you cook because, I'm playing the other game. But I mentioned this just so briefly before we
Yes.
started, but I went to an international school growing up. So all of my friends loved soccer. They
Hmm.
were all huge, like they all had a Premier League team, and every Monday we'd come into school and they'd all be bullying each other about whose team beat the other team. And the World Cup got like so heated at our school because there was like actual alliances being formed.
Yes.
But that made it so that I really never watched baseball or football. And
Yeah.
so when I got to college, it really left me behind. Where
Hmm.
anytime I would meet someone who knew sports, they would be like, "So what's your favorite football team?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't actually." And coming from New York, baseball and football, there's two teams for
Yeah.
each,
Hmm.
and I don't really have an allegiance to like I like all four of them really, and that makes
Sure.
people so upset.
Oh,
They're
of
like,
course.
you
Yes.
cannot equally like the Yankees and the Mets. That's just not allowed.
Yes.
And so that was always a tough conversation to broach.
I bet. Yeah. You're like, is there any chance you're asking about the original football?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah,
could
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah. Do you
Um,
want to talk about Liverpool? Because I
can,
will meet you there.
we don't have to dive into this too much, and it's possible you've told me before, but did you grow up on the East Coast? I know you lived in New York for a little while.
I grew up in New York. Yeah. I
Okay,
actually
gotcha.
grew up right next to Madison Square Garden, like a couple
Whoa.
blocks away. Yeah. So whenever I did get to go to a Rangers game or a very occasional Knicks game, we would just like walk over during the national anthem and like get in right at the puck drop, which was amazing.
Wow, that's
Um,
great.
yeah. Also, not related to video games, to go back to the improv, UCB Chelsea. I was basically the midpoint between Madison Square Garden and UCB Chelsea.
Wow.
And so I was so close to UCB and I never went once. And I had an older sister who's like 9 years older than me, and she was going since like 2004. Like some
Wow.
incredible people were performing at that time, you know,
Hmm.
and she was always like to be my brother, like, you two should really come. And I was like, that looks dumb. I'm not interested. Stupid name. Don't care. And then I got to college and I was like, oh no, I think this is my entire thing. I think this
Yes.
is my whole deal.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes you just got to be the person to make the choice to do that.
Yeah.
You can't be forced into it. I like my mom made me do a musical when I was growing up. I did like some church plays a little bit.
Interesting.
But then she was like, I really think you should audition for like the city's like children's musical. And I didn't want to do it. The only reason I did it was because my best friend's mom was making him do it, so at least we had each other.
Yeah.
But I didn't want anything to do with it. I did it one year, was gone, and here I am also like, an actor and a performer, and they're like, well, what if I would have done that?
Yeah, we had a musical every year that I never even auditioned for once. I was like,
Yes,
there's no way I'll do that. And then in high school, I took drama because I like didn't want to take computer science, and for some
sure.
reason you could like take drama instead of computer
Interesting.
science. Um, and me and a friend performed Who's on First, the Abbott and Costello's thing, and we killed. I think also because we were at an international school, so it was a lot of like uh immigrant parents or like first generation who like loved the language game of it,
Oh,
you
sure,
know, so it
yes.
was just like crushing in the room. And after I was like, wow, do I actually love this the whole time? Like, was that
Yes,
the thing? Yeah.
totally. I love it too, and it's like being like, do I love it? Like recreating a long time, one of those popular sketches, I guess,
Yeah.
ever. But still, that is fun and really cool. Thank you. I love like diving into a little bit more of like where people are from and like those details. So feel free to share them whenever you'd like.
Yeah, yeah.
So to get us a little back on track of the game stuff, one question I have for you is that were games primarily something that like you played not out of convenience but out of proximity, or did you ever have like a console or a Game Boy or something that was like, this is mine?
I don't think I had anything like, I think we had a PSP. And
Mm,
most of the my brother and I had a good amount of video games, but it was like we shared them all, you
yeah.
know? So it was like we had one PSP. I think we had a Game Boy Advance at one point.
Hmm.
We definitely had Game Boys and we would play Pokemon, whatever the early Pokemons were
Yes.
on our Game Boys. But I don't think we ever got to the point of like DS or things like that.
Sure.
But I don't think I will say that maybe my brother played NHL a bit, but
Hmm.
NHL was definitely like my thing. That
Okay.
was the thing I singularly was interested in and doing it all the time. And he would want to buy, like, we would go to GameStop and we were probably getting 5 games a year or something. I
Yeah.
think 4 of them were his picks. And then I would be like, just whatever the NHL game is, that's what I want.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I was just kind of curious about that. Now, I would like to know, there's a couple more questions I have about your history as well. And I guess the first one is, do you still play video games outside of the NHL series? And if it's not something that like you have, do you ever play with friends?
I don't really play games anymore. I think because last year I moved out of the place that my friend's Xbox was in, and
Oh,
now I am currently without a console.
mm,
I also find that I I have gotten extremely busy in a good way,
yeah.
and it's the way I play video games is so unproductive and so I don't think it's even meditative for me. I don't think it's like a de-stressor. Like I'll explain how I play NHL and you'll see what I mean. But
Yes.
there's something about it that I think I was like, I shouldn't do this often.
Sure.
And then the other issue I have is like my friends who do play video games are so much better at all of them than me.
Hmm.
So like when I go back home and visit my friends in New York, they're still all playing FIFA, but they've been playing nonstop since we were in high school. And it's just like I am just wasting their time by
Yeah.
joining in the game. You know, it's just
Yeah.
like no one wants me playing it.
Yes. Catching up is
Um,
not going to happen.
yeah, exactly. It's just like you guys are doing this every day, so I've been left behind, and that's
Yes.
okay. We'll hang out in other ways.
Totally.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I was just kind of curious. That's always like people. It's fun to have all walks of gamer on this show. Whether it's someone like me who has like made it a fraction of their personality, or someone like you has maybe played like a little more casually throughout your life, or when something's been around. That being said, I think the last question I have for you is is there a game or two, it's up to you, that you haven't highlighted from your history that you'd like to shout out before we move on?
Let me think. And I'll also say I really don't think I am a gamer. I really again, people who watch the show will know that when people reference video games on the show, I'm often like, what's going on? What are we talking about?
Yes, yeah.
I think Rocky recently played a Sims character and he was doing the Sims
Oh,
talk. And I was
sure.
like, why is he talking like that? What's going on? And they were
Yeah.
all like, are you kidding? Like, you don't understand this reference. Um, but in terms of a game I forgot to shout out, let's see, we had FIFA, we had Dynasty Warriors was the big one. Oh, I really loved the Sonic games,
Okay.
and which was Dreamcast. And in
Yes.
particular, Sonic did their own version of Mario Party. It was nearly a one for one.
Yes.
And I loved that game. I used to
Gosh.
play it. That was the one like my brother would want to play Mario Party, and I would be like, I want to play the Sonic one instead.
I had someone on last year to talk about it. I'm looking it up right now because I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I also can't remember it.
Sonic Shuffle.
Sonic Shuffle, yes, and there
Yes.
were like these card. It was honestly in hindsight like Mario Party had the better system because it was like more complicated. There was like a lot of things that could constantly be changing, and like
Yes.
I think the later Mario parties ended up being like that,
Hmm.
but I did love Sonic Shuffle.
Yes. Such a we did as a part of our games club that I was talking about that at the top of the show in my intro. We used to basically cover like two games a month just as like an overview episode. What we do now is we play through a game over like a quarter of a year. So it's more of like a book club format. Last year in quarter three, we were doing we did Sonic Adventure for the Dreamcast. Uh,
Yes.
and so as we did some like tertiary or like related Sonic content during that time, but it was perfect timing that I had someone come on to talk about Shuffle because it's also from the same era. It's weird, but like I was fascinated by what I saw from this game.
Yeah, it does feel like a dark universe Mario Party
Yeah,
almost, like they're having a bad dream where you're playing Mario Party and
totally.
it's that.
Hmm.
But I really, oh man, I love that one.
It's a absolute like curiosity that I have about it that I don't know if I'll ever play it, but boy, if I do, I'm gonna feel pretty good about it. Well, Chris, thank you so much for diving into a little bit of your history with video games, in this first part of the show. We're gonna go ahead and take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about all things the NHL series. So I'll see you on the other side.
Love it. See you soon.
Greetings, Commander Jeremy.
Greetings, Commander Connor.
And I'm Otacon.
We are here to spread the news about our Mass Effect Games Club on patreon.com/SuperNPCRadio.
Whether you're Aquarian, Solarian, or Vegetarian, you can play along with the show as we cruise through Mass Effect 1 and discuss our journey on a new podcast episode every Friday.
You can listen to the entire thing by supporting us at the $5 DJ Toad tier and above at patreon.com/SuperNPCRadio.
Call me a Paragon or Renegade, if you're nasty.
Hey guys, look. Here comes Garrus. He's so hot.
Why don't you try and romance him?
Here he comes now.
Hello, humans. Something smells a little funny.
It's piss. I'm sorry.
Yuck. Well, Otacon, it was worth a shot.
Who could have predicted that?
Check out the Mass Effect Games Club over at patreon.com/SuperNPCRadio.
Welcome back to Call Me By Your Game. I'm still here. It's your host, Connor McCabe, with Chris Tcholakian. Chris, hello.
Hello.
And finally, we're here at the main event, the main course, where we hear from our guest about the game that he's brought on today. Today, as we've already discussed, we're going to be talking about the NHL series as a whole. And Chris, like I told you before the show, I'm going to do a little table setting right now, just telling the guests about the series in general. So if there's stuff you want to add or important things that we should share, or if you're like, Connor, that's incorrect, like, you got the green light to dive in at any time.
All right. Good to know.
But other than that, I'm just going to be reading from Wikipedia. So here we go. NHL, and I want to get your confirmation on this, colloquially known as Chell.
I've heard that in recent years because now there's a culture of people who don't watch hockey but they play NHL because I guess the gameplay part is fun. So it's now Chell, and cool guys unlike myself will play the game. I play it differently. We'll get to that. But yes, I've heard it's called Chell.
Well, I was very curious about that, and as I was reading it, I started to include it in like promotional stuff, like I think in a tweet I sent out earlier, and I was like, I don't know, Chris is going to tell me how this feels. So anyway, this series is a professional ice hockey simulation series of video games developed by EA Vancouver and published yearly by Electronic Arts under the EA Sports brand. The game is developed under license from the NHL as well, which enables the use of the league's team names, stadiums, and colors in the game, which has not always been the case for the series. I did a little research today. There's not a ton of like just people who've dedicated, a whole YouTube video to the history of the NHL series. That being said, I did find one that was super helpful. That, like, I'm gonna look it up just so I can actually shout that creator out in a little bit. But there's been changes throughout the series as well. Chris, you were talking earlier about how like sometimes they are very granular, and then I'm sure that they've been over the years, though, if you zoomed out, you could see the bigger changes that have been made. But is there anything like about the series or the journey that you want to share context-wise before we get into your personal history?
Yeah, I mean, to the point you were just saying, I think there's the licensing agreement. There's like a lot of leagues the prospects come out of, and I think they don't have the rights to all of those leagues. Like I think they don't have the rights to the college hockey players. So like you don't have them, and then I think there was like a couple other leagues. But historically, what's interesting is in the 90s, it looked like an arcade game. You could barely see anyone's face, and it was just like push this button to shoot. And then in like the late 90s, early 2000s, they really pivoted to being like, this is the game you can beat someone up in.
Yes.
And so they started doing 3-on-3, even though hockey is 5-on-5. And most of the game was like half the controller was just like, this is how you hit and fight. Like those were like two huge aspects of it. And you used to like, if you scored 3 goals, which is a hat trick, you would like your player would light on fire, and then like for the rest of the game they would like be on fire, like physically on fire.
Yes.
But it was like a good thing. And the early 2000s when I started playing, it was very much just like all the announcer canned lines were just like, oh, he looks so hurt with how hard that hit, like he rocked him just now. And then as fighting and hitting, people were like, this is probably like not good for the players and their head, like the league has kind of started to move away from that. So the games have also kind of started to move away from that,
Yes.
where I think you can still fight, but they make it very like different than it was. And now
Yes.
they're focusing way more on like gameplay
Gotcha.
and graphics and things like that. But also the thing with NHL is they pretty much just take the NBA games from 2 years prior and
Hmm.
copy those basically because they can't keep up with NBA because they're not as popular of a league. So they're like, what did NBA 2020 have? We'll take that
Oh,
for the new
sure.
game.
Like a player mode or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's
I
always like the NBA game will create the thing and then I'll wait for 2 years and then the NHL will have a slightly worse version of it in theirs.
Yes. Yeah, there's definitely like doing a little research today and being pretty familiar with uh a few sports series. It was just interesting to see like what parallels there were or how did the series seem to differ over the years. But yeah, like you were saying, kind of this is one thing that I don't know, who knows if we'll get into this in your personal sharing moment. But I know that there are a lot of fans of current sports franchises, like long running ones as well, whether it's NBA 2K or Madden, that it's become very cynical from like the developer side of just what these games have tended to look like. It's not that they're necessarily bad now, but like and it could be nostalgia glasses that we look back on our era of sports games and are like, that was the best. Kind of like sports in general, but there does seem to be like a lot of features that are not present anymore in some games. And
Well, you might actually know better than me about this. This is my so barely educated hypothesis, but like one thing I notice as like a novice video game player
mhm,
is if I'm playing Nintendo 64, I'm going from hitting the thing to turn the console on to gameplay within about 25 to 30 seconds.
sure.
Whereas if I'm turning on a Xbox 360, it's going to be like 8 minutes until I'm playing the game because there's so many things that have to open.
Hmm.
And I think it's because of like the online
Oh,
connection,
sure. Hmm.
which when I was playing NHL 2010 or whatever, that just like, if it existed, I was not aware of it at all. It was
Yes.
so minuscule. But I think now that there is the like online, you can do like these patch updates and stuff.
Hmm.
And am I right in that like when most video games are released now, they're like not done yet, but they're like, we'll get the rest of it going?
Your perception is pretty accurate. And it's sometimes it's not like an intentional thing, but it's just like, oh, because the game is so big or there's so many branching paths, we couldn't test all of this, so we'll continue to update it. And then there's some very like cynical versions of like there's a game maybe you've heard of Cyberpunk 2077. When that
I've
game
heard of it.
released, it was a disaster, and there's just no way the developers didn't know that that's how it was going to look. But to your original point, yeah, quite often like it's just kind of understood that a game is going to get patched, um, as you know, months, years into a release for sure.
Yeah, which is crazy to me.
Hmm.
I'm so shocked that that's like a thing. Everyone just goes like, yeah. There was some hubbub. I don't have NHL 24, but everyone was so furious when that came out because they
Yeah.
were just like 60% of the game is non-functioning. It's
Yes.
just like they barely changed anything and
Hmm.
yet 60% of the game is non-functioning.
Yeah.
And then the I think EA was like, yeah, we don't have like the manpower to like make the game, but it's just like, well, how do you have
Yeah.
that? Why do you release the game? That I don't know.
It's
To me, it's like I think about when I was a kid and I played Pokemon or whatever, and it was
yeah.
like the game was done once I
Hmm.
got it. Like I had the game and it was finished. And I
Yeah.
think now the video game industry is like you can kind of get away with half finished and still put it out.
Yeah, there's like I think because this is something I've learned just a little bit more about in the last 6 months specifically, um, there's definitely like I understand why that happens more in today's games, and it's not like the worst thing in the world, but there are because games are just so much more extravagant and detailed,
Yeah.
and there's so much more that goes into them than they did when we were growing up. But studios will definitely or publishers, especially like EA. EA is known for being like one of the worst companies in the world and whatnot.
Surprised me.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like, if they're like a studio of a game they make gets bought by EA, people are fearful or upset. But to sort of finish off that point for myself at least, studios will take advantage of that or be like, we can just release a half-made game or a game that's obviously has errors that people shouldn't be paying for, but yeah, it's too bad. But yeah, so I think the way we got down that, I was just asking you if there were other details to include about the series,
Oh yeah.
basically.
Yeah, I think the only thing is in my memory, I had I think NHL Hits was like a sub game
Yes,
of
it
it.
was.
Yes, but I remember that being the much more popular one. That's the one
Mhm.
we had. And then they came out in I think 2004 or 5 with NHL Hits Pro, which was
Oh.
like bridging the two. And it kind of like from that point, if they kept making NHL Hits, I was not aware of it. And it really became like this is the standard way we play. It's 5-on-5. It's all
Hmm.
this. And what really got robust and built out was the manager aspects of the game.
Yes.
And once we get into how I play it, it
Ooh.
is almost my old roommates used to say I was playing menus because I would spend
Yes.
hours at a time just being the general manager.
Yeah.
So as that built out, that was when I really got hooked.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. I mean, I feel like this is a great time to sort of transition into that. The last thing I want to say is that uh the YouTube creator of the video that I was referencing where I did learn about a little bit more about the NHL series. Well, the video is titled "The Fall of EA's NHL Series: What Happened," and it's by Soft Drink TV. I thought it was, at least to someone from the outside, pretty informative video, worth
I'm
watching.
gonna watch that.
But yeah, let's get into your history with it. I would like to start though with when you first entered the series.
Yes. So what I believe is important background to this is a question I'm asked all the time when I try to talk about hockey, which is why do you like hockey? What is going on there?
Are you okay?
Yeah, like why this? And then you don't like the other sport. Like it's so if someone likes hockey and they're American, it's usually because like they're so maxed out on baseball, football, and basketball that they're like, I'll add this one into the mix.
Yeah.
But this is like kind of my exclusive sport. And the reason is I like a little bit of soccer and basketball, but this one lives way above the rest. My mom in the 80s works in fashion,
Oh, cool.
and she's working for this jeans company, Sasson Jeans. And her first project, like her boss gives her this huge campaign when she's like 24 or something, like super young, gets like a big campaign and goes to the Rangers and has them promote Sasson Jeans. And you can still find this commercial to this day where four pretty good Ranger players are skating around the ice in blue jeans singing a song about blue jeans. uh as you can imagine, that that was not well received by the rest of the league. And they were already kind of seen as like the metropolitan pretty boys,
Sure,
you know,
yes.
elitist. And hockey was the most violent at that point in time. And I
Mm.
really think that commercial led to the Rangers getting their ass kicked more than every other team
Yes.
for about 10 years.
That's
Um,
it's this is kind of like the call is coming from within inside the house scenario where it's like you're a Rangers fan and could your mom have been responsible
yeah.
for paying
Did
you,
she
Vendor?
put our franchise back?
Yes.
But in doing that, she started hanging out with all the Rangers players and actually briefly dated one guy on the team.
Wow.
Um, So my mom had been a Rangers fan for years and years, and then she met my dad, and my dad is a immigrant from Lebanon. And when he came to the States, she was like, "Oh, I have friends on the team. They get us tickets. Like, let's go." And he was just blown away by the concept of hockey. He was
Oh,
just
wow.
like, they're all on ice. They're beating the shit out of each other. It's moving so fast. Like, what the hell is this? And so he really became the torchbearer of
Wow.
hockey and was super into it. The Rangers won the cup in 1994, which was like they hadn't won since 1940. So
Oh,
it was like this
wow.
huge thing. So when I was born in 1995, it was like a good time to be a Rangers fan. There's even like an ESPN article from 1994 that is like, is hockey about to pass basketball in popularity? Which
Oh,
is so funny
interesting.
to think about in
Yes.
today's society of like, there was a time where they were like, is everyone going to start liking hockey more than
That's
basketball?
so
But
fun.
yeah, that was like the kind of like place I was born into of both my parents liked hockey through a weird uh potentially diabolical campaign ad.
Yes.
And you can still find the video on YouTube. It's you should link to it in the show
I
notes because it
like
is
100% will. Whether
it
you or I
is
find it, like
yeah.
this needs to be this is great context for this episode.
Yeah. Um so yeah, from like from like 4 or 5 years old, I'm super obsessed with the Rangers. And oh my God, there's a video game where I can be the Rangers. This is awesome. So I
Found it
think
immediately, by the way.
yeah. It's infamous. Um So I am like, oh, this is perfect. This is a video game where I can be the Rangers, which is to
Yes.
me, when I was 7, they were my honestly, probably still are a huge amount of my deal now. But
Yeah.
when I was 7, you have even less going on. You're just like every night was just like, is there a Ranger game tonight? When is the next Rangers game?
Yes. You
Um,
know their starting lineup and like years of it.
Absolutely. And that in particular, uh, my parents wouldn't let me play
Mm.
because my older siblings had a tendency to quit on things very easily. So by the time I got around, my parents just kind of assumed I would quit at
Oh,
things,
sure.
which kind of sucked because they were like, "You're just not going to do things because we don't think you'll follow through on them." And I was like, "Give me a chance to quit at least." Um, but so they didn't let me play hockey, and they were probably also like, I don't want to get up this early and watch you get your head caved in.
Yes, for
So
sure.
yeah. And so I like didn't get to play it really,
Mm.
which just made me more kind of like consumed by the managerial aspects of the sport. So I was always looking at the roster, I was always looking at the trades we were making, the signings, the records from the team. So as the management side of the game developed, I was like really moving into that. And I was like,
Sure.
oh, I just want to be doing, I would play the gameplay part, but I was like, I'm going to do this just so my team wins because we need to win for our off season to go well. And then I'll really get into the off season.
Totally.
But that was what it was all about. But that's a long way of saying I think I started in about 2002 was my first NHL video game.
Okay, gotcha. That's very fun. Was that do you remember like how long you were sticking with it for? Like, was it year in and year out something you were going back to or trying new ones or going back to old ones?
Yes, I think it probably ebbed and flowed a bit um, for like my Dynasty Warriors era. Probably,
Oh, gotcha.
took that
Yes.
down a little bit. When my friends and I would all play FIFA in high school, I was probably playing less because I was like, I'm kind of getting my video game fix from this.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when I was very young, a lot, and then a thing happened where in college, my roommate had a video game console. So I bought NHL on it. And I had a thing where I was like, I'll buy it every 2 years. Because if I
Sure.
play a 1-year-old one, it's not that different. Like, the teams are a little off, but whatever. And the way I would play it is I would not play it for months at a time, and then I would spend like 3 consecutive days playing it. Like
Really binge.
yeah, like really like morning to night, go to bed, wake up, and just like immediately go back into the living room and play. And then I would be like, all right, I got that out of my system. Don't need to
Yes.
play that again for 3, 4 months. And then I would sort of repeat the cycle. Um, and then when like it definitely coincided with like maybe depressive periods I would have, I would be like, oh, maybe this 3 days is stretching a little longer. It's gonna be,
Sure.
yeah. Um, and now I don't have a console and I can't play it. And honestly, I fiend for it sometimes, but I think it's probably for the best that I don't have those 4-day dark periods where I'm just you can't reach me because
Yes.
I'm in the year 2039 as a general manager.
Just like making very crucial roster decisions on
Yeah,
who is
with
on
like
your
a
team.
team that is completely computer generated at that
Yes,
point because
yeah.
it's so far in the future that like none of the guys are still in the league.
Yeah, there's no
Um,
actual like player pictures. It's just all the avatars in
Yes,
their headshots or
exactly.
whatever.
Yeah. I would get to there a lot. And the other on the thing of like the updates and the game not working, I would notice that like once you got like 12, 13 years into the future, the game would kind of just break because they were just like, no one's going to get this far. Like no
Yeah.
one's going to go to this point. And little did they know that I would do it in a weekend, basically.
Yes. You bringing up the like weekend or 3 or 4 day like binge periods. Sometimes I wonder it like just if I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. I think what I'm getting at here very slowly is that I wonder sometimes, would that be healthier if that were my relationship with video games? If I just like got it out of my system and then had more time for other things? Or is it better that I like am always playing games but spacing it out over smaller chunks? I don't know if there's an answer to
I
it,
don't
but
know. I think it's sort of like there's an interesting parallel with like addiction there, where is it better to have binge weekends
yes.
or to kind of be drinking all the
Yeah, or to
time?
be a
Like,
functioning alcoholic.
yeah, it's like they're both not good. I think
Yeah.
like the way to do it is to like have a moderate relationship with it.
Yes.
Um, which maybe you do have. I think you can play video games more than you can drink alcohol before it becomes a problem, I think.
That's true. Yeah, you don't start noticing those dependencies as much or how it makes your body feel. Well, unless
Yeah.
depends on how much you play.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I was really hoping we would get into this this sort of clinical look at
Yeah.
addiction in this
No, I came
episode.
on as an intervention for you, actually. Yeah, your friends asked me to.
I thought so, and no wonder everyone in the chat saying, "Look in the mirror, Connor." Um, that's fun. Do you, obviously this is, something that you have done with the game a number of times from all accounts. Uh, do you have like a most memorable seat? Like I almost said season, but when I say season to us, that might mean like a season of the hockey team that you're playing. More of a period. Has there been like a period that's most memorable or you were most into it?
Pandemic.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
The first 6 months of the pandemic, I was productive. I was like, this will be over
Whoa, the
soon.
first six.
Yeah, I really lasted a while in that. I remember the first 2 months of the pandemic in particular feeling like everyone's freaking out and I feel fine. I'm not so worried. Because like I'm anxious all the time. So now and I'm like, I've already been here.
The
Like this is
playing field's been
fine.
evened.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was like, it's fine. It's going to work out. I have a
Mhm.
lot of projects I can keep myself busy with. The government's literally sending me money to stay home, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then by around month 6, I was like, will this ever end? Is there
Yeah.
a point and I started to kind of go crazy. And that's when I truly just started playing that game all the time, every day, hours and hours at a time.
Yes.
And the way because I play the manager mode almost exclusively, I would like I like had like little pieces of paper that I would be like writing down my like lineups in. I had like trade target because the game should have had those aspects, but it
Sure.
was so bad that I was like doing my own patch updates to the game, just like analog. I was just like, all right,
Yeah.
well, I'll create like a watch list for my trade, and like I'll create like what my prospect pool looks like and everything.
Yes.
Um, and I would get so into that element of it. And then my roommates would come down and they're like, it's still just like, you're never playing the game. And I was like, I'm telling you, I am playing the game. I'm playing the best part of the game right
Yes.
now by looking at all these menus all day.
Like I'm doing the legwork so I can actually enjoy this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've won 5 Stanley Cups today. So I'm having a great time. I'm
Yeah.
really enjoying myself.
And you don't get that by not doing the work, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so great. There's like versions of I don't know if there's a hockey version of this style of game, but there's one baseball series called Out of the Park Baseball where there is no and there's probably more than this one. There's no baseball gameplay. It's truly just like manager style gameplay where you're doing the sort of things that you're doing in NHL. And maybe it's good
Yeah,
it doesn't exist for hockey.
it's probably healthy for me. Well, I know there's like a Steam game that is like NHL Manager because the Everything
Oh,
Now fans have pointed it towards me, but I'm like, that's again where I'm like, it would be very dangerous for me to get that
yes,
game. Like it could really put me back on a lot of projects I'm working on.
totally.
Um, and I know that a lot of my friends play the soccer manager game.
Sure.
I forgot the name of it, but there's like a very notable one for there.
Gotcha.
Um, but yeah, I think there is a Steam game of just straight manager mode, and every day is a battle to not get it.
Just slowly reaching towards your mouse and
Yeah.
keyboard. No, I shouldn't.
Yeah.
Not to keep getting into the specifics too much, but when I think back to sports games that I've played, occasionally, sometimes it all just runs together. Sometimes though, I can remember like a standout season or team that I had. Do any of those come to mind for your gameplay, or is it more just like a collage?
It kind of is the latter because I go so quickly where
Yeah,
I will do like 15 years in like a weekend. So I have so many, and
yeah, that's
like
true.
I got so burnt out on being the Rangers that I was like every team in the league at certain point, like I was just going through all of them.
Yeah.
I do remember an older game, must have been 2010 or 2011 because I was like in middle school, so maybe even earlier, where there was no salary cap or
Oh,
something. Like they hadn't figured that out. And I remember like through like trades that were deemed fair or whatever, I like created this team of just all the best players in the game.
yeah,
Like I
of
just made
course.
this team that was every single player above 88 overall or
Yeah.
whatever. And I remember just like the pride of just like, wow, I actually made the super team. And
Yep.
then we won every single game all the time, and it got boring because I was like, oh, they're just too good. They've broken the game.
Of course. It's
Yeah.
it's something that I liked to do as a kid as well with certain like I think of baseball games in particular. Um I like to do that and then uh I would get so good at the games that the challenge was and when you're playing with players like that, the challenge goes away. So now like a series that I still revisit it almost every year is the Backyard Baseball series, like the
Oh
children's
yeah.
point and click baseball
I
games.
remember that one.
Talked about it a bunch on this show, but when I play those games now, I pick like shitty teams intentionally because that's how I give myself a challenge. Uh,
Yeah. I
this is
was
really,
doing that when I moved on from the Rangers. I was like, who's the worst team right now? Who has the
yeah,
least prospects, the shittiest situation? Let me see if I
yes.
can do that with them.
You're just like the Billy Bean of hockey, moneyballing your way to like Rangers glory.
Absolutely. And that was an issue I had. I would try to play NBA because my brother is much more of a Knicks fan, and he would play the NBA games and similarly would do the manager style stuff. And it was so hard because they have like the luxury tax and like
Yeah,
there's like trade exemption. Like every time I see a trade in basketball, I can't even. I feel like I'm reading like very complex math theory. I'm like,
Yes.
I don't know what half these words are.
Yeah.
All these players are in the trade, but like going to a different team not related to this trade somehow. Half
Yes.
the players' contracts are invalid now somehow. Like it's so complex. And in hockey, they are just like hard cap of very little money. I think the salary cap this year is $83 million, which
Yeah.
is like nothing compared to the NBA. And it's just like you can't spend above that. End of story. And so
Yeah.
you're just like, okay, this is very simple. I have my players, I have their salaries. I have to move these around to
Yeah.
get equal numbers here.
I could definitely, that makes so much sense on how that's a much more, not gentle, but like forgiving. There's a word I'm missing, but like an entry point that is easy to get into as opposed to like what you're talking about with like I'm an NBA fan and I don't understand almost all of it. Like I don't
Yeah.
get
I
it.
can't keep up. And then there with like the pick swaps, like I remember I was trying to like play that game and I couldn't complete a single trade because
Yeah.
it was just so complicated. Or I would like completely lose the trade. I would end up getting so frustrated that I would trade like my starting power forward for like a second round pick and a bench player. And I was like, why did I do that? This is the
Yeah.
only one they accepted, but why did I do that?
Yeah. Just a lesson that that those aren't for you.
Yeah,
We'll stick with hockey.
exactly.
We've talked so much, a really good amount about like the game and like the way you play it as well. Uh, whether it's a specific time, kind of like the pandemic era you were referring to, or another significant moment you've had with the game, uh, can you take me back a little bit to like what you had going on, or where you were playing this game, and like what those rooms looked like?
I used to play. So my brother and I had rooms that were opposite to each other, and we actually both had these weird sliding plastic doors that had no soundproofing whatsoever. It was awful. And so our bedrooms were like 10 feet away or 20 feet away from each other, and you could just it was basically like sleeping in the same room, but just like with
Yes.
these weird plastic. I think it had used to been like an office space or something
Oh,
that we
sure.
converted into a loft. Um, but in between those two awful doors, we had like our video game setup, which was
Okay.
like this one junky like TV stand type thing, all four, three of our consoles, and then like a crappy old TV, and then this like really dirty old brown couch that would fold out into a bed for when either of us had friends over. And I would say I logged most of my video game hours, especially pre-pandemic, in that like area between our two rooms. Um, and just, I remember spring breaks where it would just be like, wake up, walk two steps out of my bedroom, set up there for the day, watch Nat play, Super Mario 64 for
Yeah.
10 hours. Um, but that was really like, in hindsight, that was sort of our area in the house
Yeah,
where like no one else had to be there because it was our bedrooms or the video games.
totally.
So we would spend a ton of time there.
That's
And
cool.
then that also was the place where my brother would there was a carpet between the couch and the TV, and my brother would often hand me oven mitts and say we're gonna box, which was just him wailing on me as like a 6-year-old, and
Oh
he
my
was like
God.
10. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to box, and he's like, no, it'll be fun.
No,
And
this
then I was
game's
just,
making me mad, bro. We're gonna
yeah, yeah,
box.
yeah. It's like, can I just watch you play Sonic or something? I don't want
Yeah.
to do that. But that's older
Gosh,
brothers.
the price of being a younger sibling and like what it costs to spend time with those that came before us. I am an older sibling only. I guess the way I could have said that is I'm like the oldest of two. I could have made that a little easier to digest. But my best friend growing up, his older brothers were like my older brothers, and they were very similar to what you're describing. Like I liked them and thought they were cool, But there was a lot of like, it was just a lot of pain that you paid for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it be insults or whatever, but I still wanted to hang out with them.
I know. It is a very insane dynamic. I
Yeah.
remember also my brother, we used to take the school bus home together, and my brother was like a real juvenile delinquent. And he would always do all this shit on the bus that I thought was so funny and cool as like a first grader.
Yes.
And I would come home, and at dinner I would tell my parents, like, here's this cool thing Nat did on the bus, and he would get in trouble. So he like
Yeah.
stopped talking to me for a couple years
Oh
because
my
he was
gosh,
like,
that hurts.
yeah, he was like, this guy is like gonna get me in trouble, even though I was just like, you're awesome, man, what you're
Yeah.
doing so cool, and I didn't realize it was wrong.
You think you're like regaling his like
Yeah.
glory, and you're really just like giving the evidence to your parents.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh
Yeah.
man. Well, Chris, I feel like we've gotten to talk about so much great stuff here, both when it comes to the game and the context from your life, different periods of your life, since it's had such a lengthy time with you. Uh, but I did want to give you a second. Like, is there anything you haven't gotten to share about this game series or, your life from playing it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure this is not unique to this game in that a lot of these games that people come on to talk to you about, I'm sure they've played since they were 4 years old and into adulthood,
Often it is like a game from that era.
Yeah. So, but it is still, and I get, and I'll just probably echo a sentiment that's already been expressed. It's very cool to like have that thing that as you have moved through time, even though the graphics change or whatever, like it's been this thing following
Yeah.
me the whole way. And I think probably even outside video games, like just sports in general kind of has that effect in a cool way where you're like, I remember every season of this team. I feel so bound to the New York Rangers now in a
Mhm.
way that is almost outside of my control, where it's
Yes.
just like for the rest of my life, I'm going to be so invested in this team's success. Like
Yeah.
there's just nothing that will break that for me anymore because it's
Mhm.
so ingrained in me. Um, so it is cool to have this like uh pillar,
Yeah.
throughout my life where it's like I can reference this thing. In terms of other stuff I wanted to share, I have a chip on my shoulder where everyone thinks it's weird that I play the menus part exclusively, and I think it's normal and cool. And there are Twitch streamers who just play the menu part exclusively. Obviously, not a lot for NHL, but there are. I've seen them.
There are dozens of you.
Yeah, there are dozens of, maybe not even dozens. There's maybe a dozen of us. But I will go to my grave and saying I play it the better way. I play
Yes.
it the more fun way where you get to just you have this sort of godlike reality over the game
Mhm.
and you get to live years at a time. Every time I try to play, like I'll do the be a pro version, and it's so boring to me. And
Yeah.
especially boring in hockey. It's so funny how bad it is for hockey because in hockey you play like 60 seconds at a time, like in hockey you're rolling four lines throughout the game. It's not like
Yeah.
basketball where the starters are playing 42 minutes of the game and you briefly come out and come back in hockey. If you're a forward and you're a top line forward, you're playing a third of the game.
Mhm.
So most of the game is like for 40 seconds you skate around and then you go back to the bench and then you have to like simulate 2 minutes and then you come
Yes.
back out for 40 seconds. It's so bad. It's like comically bad. So I would try that and just get so bored. You have to play all 82 games in the year. It was
Mhm.
just so boring. This way is so much better. I can just be like, all right, team looking pretty good. Simulate the entire year in one sitting. All right, we didn't make the playoffs. Time to reevaluate. What do I do now? I'm going to trade
Yes.
all these people away, do the draft. There's 7 rounds in the NHL draft, so it's like longer.
Oh wow.
It rocks. I miss it just talking about it,
Yes.
but not the gameplay aspect, just the menus aspect.
Exactly. It often occasionally happens on the show where I accidentally like plant a bug in someone's brain who comes on it and they can't stop thinking about it. So maybe that's going to be you. You had
I
me
think it
thinking
is.
too, talking about, the Play a Pro version, where I know in like the 2K series, there's also a bunch of stuff outside of the basketball where you like
Oh
see the
yeah.
player's life and like
Yeah,
what
I
they
love
do.
that when your teammates like, hey, we're all gonna go get hot dogs later, and it's like your answer tree is like, that sounds unhealthy. I'm gonna go to practice instead. Like, it's so funny how the immersive element of it is like,
And is that there
especially when
for the
you
NHL one too?
it is there for the NHL one, but it's so again, it's just so dimmed down.
Yes,
So it's
it's
like
just a
you're
sketch in
having
my head.
yeah, you're having a meeting with your coach, and your coach is like, "Hey, I want to see you play harder out there." And the answers are like, "Okay," or "I think I'm playing hard already," or whatever. And you're just like, "All right, I'll just say okay and move on to the next thing." Or
Totally.
your teammate comes up and is like, "We're gonna go bowling later. Do you want to come?" And it's like you lose energy, but then gain like chemistry with your team. It's so bizarre. And then I also think like there is a very funny, I don't know if it's a sketch or a game or whatever, but like the actual life of an NBA player
Hmm.
doing Be a Pro, where it's like you are at a strip club.
Yeah.
Like, will you cheat on your wife or will you
Yeah.
do, like there is such a funny, like actual reality of being an
Yeah. And
NBA player they could do there.
hockey's like, do you want ketchup or mustard on
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. Yeah. Hockey's like, hey, try to score a goal in the next game. And it's like, okay. And those are
Yes.
your options.
That it. I'm way too tickled by that.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Well, Chris, thank you for bringing on, this series to talk about in general. I didn't expect it to go down the road that it did as far as, your managerial, success. But thanks for bringing this game on. We got a little more to do, but I appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me bring it on, and to the listeners at home, sound off if I'm normal and my way of playing it is correct. Let me know.
And if you think otherwise, don't say anything at all.
Yeah, just ignore this.
So I'll lead us into our post-show segments. The first of which, of the two, is the Fact Me by Your Game segment. And this is just where I share a fun fact with my guest about the game they brought on. I've only got the one today. I did source this from Wikipedia, but honestly, even in the video I watched earlier, I referenced earlier, from Soft Drink TV, I think it was, they talk about it.
Yes.
And I have this titled Ice Tilt. Oh no. Are you familiar with the phrase ice tilt and the concept for the game?
No.
Okay, well
What
that's
is this?
actually, I think I understand why, and that's because of how you play this game. It makes so much sense. Well, Chris, one idea that has been widely discussed over many years within the fan community of this game is a purported automatic built-in gameplay mechanism referred to as ice tilt, which modifies skaters and honestly anything in the game from like way the referees called it, the goalie's
Oh,
aptitude.
yes,
It's
yes, yes.
basically like this rubber band mechanism that if you're playing online with someone, even if you're way better, the game will find ways to make it closer. Uh,
Yes.
and it's been a big point of controversy for the series that they've not ever like, of course they haven't owned up to it. They usually give like a non-answer.
Yes, I feel like I that makes sense to me. I also know that like I don't know if this is the same thing, but if you play it on like too easy of a mode, it's like so easy to find like the glitch where
Hmm.
like if you're playing it on like semi-pro and you just like go to the side and pass into the middle, your player will score every single time
Yeah.
without fail. You can just win like 95-0 or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But then I also know there's like sliders in the game, which I think there is an NBA in all of them too, where you can set yourself to like 100% accuracy for every
Yes,
single
for
thing,
sure.
basically. And I was always like, that just completely kills the entire,
Yeah.
like, why do it? But I have noticed that if I'm like playing at too high a difficulty, they will absolutely just like give me a pity goal or whatever.
Sure.
And if I'm playing at too low of a difficulty, it'll be like they're not supposed to be able to do that, but they're giving them this one or two.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's an interesting thing about the game that I think would probably frustrate me if I played it. They kind of talk about this in Mario, which I think it is a literal thing in Mario Kart where the way they implement it there is like the last place
The
person,
items.
yeah, the items, like as someone who's often in first place, Chris. I'll tell you, I get a lot of coins and bananas, but
Yes, and you'll
obviously,
often in the like back half of the second lap get hit by a blue shell, no matter
yes.
what, because it's just
Oh,
like, yeah, it's
I
time
do.
for.
I do often like for just I don't know why, but I feel the need to call out every blue shell that hits me. And I'm like, "Oh, I got a blue shell on every lap that time." So, but I still won. Pretty good. Anyway, ice tilting no good. People don't like it. That's it for the fact you buy your game segment. I'll lead us into the final one, the game recommendations. Now, Chris, this segment is my one forced tie-in to the movie Call Me by Your Name, where I'm going to treat the NHL series like your passionate summer love that you have in Italy one summer. But unfortunately, my friend, as I like literally I think I got choked up a little bit. It's not going to work out. This fling isn't going to last forever. So, in order to help you get over this breakup, I'm going to present you a few recommendations for new flings that have a little bit in common with the NHL series.
All right, I'm interested in this.
Awesome.
Now, did you pre-prepare these before knowing that I mostly just do the menus component to the game?
I did, which is great. But you know what? I'm not changing a gosh darn thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so if your first recommendation is if you want to play another long running series like the NHL, that also has its own up and downs, but you're looking to try something new, I would recommend to you the Prince of Persia series. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
This is one I would sometimes watch my brother play, for
Okay,
sure.
great.
Yes, this is absolutely on that list.
Yes, this, it's there have been highs and lows. A series I have never played a game in, but I know has like its stalwart fans and then plenty of those people who also have lamented the mistakes that the series has made going along the way. So,
Yes, I think I only saw him play the first one. He used to play Prince of Persia, but he loved God of War. That was
oh,
his game.
interesting.
Yeah, but I do remember seeing Prince of Persia, and then I remember when like the movie came out, being like,
Yes.
that's weird that they're doing
Yeah.
that.
Way to go, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah.
So that's your first recommendation. Your second one is if you just want to get back to sports. You like goals. You like teams. You like passing. And more importantly, Chris, you're a man of the future. I'll go ahead and recommend a little game called Rocket League, which I'm pretty sure has no simulation elements in it at all.
I know Rocket League because two guys I lived with briefly right out of college, two are still friends. One of is Rocky from the show. They
Ah,
would play Rocket League together. So Rocket League is actually I used to watch Rocky and also Alex Alsep, the two guys who started everything now. When I lived in the house they started it in, I would just I was back to my childhood state
yes.
where I would just watch them play Rocket League and be like,
Yes.
wow, look at them go. Wow.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So there's that. I do have a bonus recommendation just because I think it's funny. I was gonna do this instead of your actual real last one, but I'm gonna tell you both of them. I had some joke about if you just want to slip around on the ice, I just recommend you play all the ice parts of Zelda games. So there's that. That was just a stupid one. But one that I actually feel really good about now is if you want to play in a video game as an athlete, but it's not actually in a sports game, I'll recommend to you the blitzball elements of Final Fantasy X. Have you heard of blitzball at all, Chris?
I have not.
So this is basically a fictional sport that is played underwater. It's sort of like a mix of I mean, it's kind of like water polo, but underwater, like completely
Huh.
submerged. And the way it actually works in Final Fantasy X itself, it's like a truly optional, like whole series of like tournaments and stuff you can play in. It is basically all simulation as well. Uh, it's not like an action sports game where you're controlling the player deliberately and like, oh, if you move to the right a little more, you can maybe make that goal. It's all simulated. So you might swim your player around, but it's just making calculations on whether or not stuff is going to work. So I don't think you also build your teams, by the way, and recruit players.
Ooh, now
So
that's where we're speaking my language.
so I recommend playing 8 hours of Final Fantasy X just to get to Blitzball and then just losing your life to it. But I'll go ahead and recap our recommendations today. We've got Prince of Persia, the Rocket League, the slippery ice parts of all Zelda games, and then Final Fantasy X Blitzball. Chris, that'll do it for the Game Rex, and that'll actually
Thank you.
bring us to the end of the show. So
Can I tell you, Final
please.
Fantasy X, Final Fantasy, the entire
Mhm.
thing, that I feel like I'm being punked when I see that game. Like when I see like Goofy and like Link or whatever, I don't know who the
Oh,
actual, but
ice
there is this part of me that's like, what is going on here?
King. You're talking about Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, yes, I am. I
Yes.
am talking about that.
To be fair, though, Kingdom Hearts has Final Fantasy characters into it.
That's
Or in it,
why
yeah.
I think I made that mistake. But yes, it is very funny. We've talked about a lot of video games today, and I think it's made me seem like I kind of know video games. But if we talked about pretty much anything outside the specific ones I said, I would be so lost and confused.
Yes.
There's like a whole world of like, and I have this problem with movies too, where people talk about new movies coming out and I have no fucking clue what they're talking about because
for sure.
I can't stop watching like some weird 70s movie that no one likes. But I every time people are talking about a new game, I'm like so confused by just what it is, how it works. People use acronyms, and I'm like, I don't know what that acronym means.
Yep.
It's such a complex world that I feel so on the outside of, and so many people my age and being on Twitch, it's like I'm supposed to know all this stuff, and I feel so alienated by it, as demonstrated by you saying Final Fantasy and me thinking it's Kingdom Hearts.
Yes. I did want to affirm though that I totally understand where that came from, and the series are made by some of the same people. And to be fair, there's plenty of people who've played a lot of Kingdom Hearts games and also don't know what the hell is going on. So you're not alone.
Okay, good.
But Chris, that brings us to the end of the show. On our way out, we can plug whatever we want, including stuff we've already plugged today. But thanks again for doing this, man. It was great to get to know you a little better and have you on the podcast.
Yeah, dude, thank you for having me. Really had a blast.
You bet. Yeah, what do you want to plug on your way out?
The Everything Now Show. Check out the Everything Now Show on Twitch, twitch.tv/Everything Now Show. We are doing it every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday in the evenings. That's if you like improv, you'll love it. We have one format that's video game adjacent, so that can be fun for the gamers. Definitely check that out. Follow me on Instagram.
Such a fun show. Gosh.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very proud of what it's become. Follow me on Instagram at Chris Tcholakian. Hopefully I will have more to promote.
Story of my life, man.
Yeah. You cannot check me out at UCB for the moment, but maybe one day. I think that's oh yeah. Is this coming out before the 27th, you think?
Yeah, yes it will.
Okay. If you're in LA, actually, even if you're not in LA, because it'll be streaming on Twitch. This is a great plug. I'm doing great here. January 27th, we're doing a very special episode of Everything Now, where we'll be filming it live in front of a studio audience at a more robust location with multi-cam setups, and it's going to be a wild one. So a good entry point, I think, if you've never seen the show, check it out, January 27th.
Awesome. Do you know if there's going to be like a ticket portal for that up?
I think no. Gotcha. I think because it's the first one, we're kind of going to do invites for the audience, especially because it's not going to be a huge audience. But down the road, there will be. And the best way to stay on that is to follow the Everything Now Show on social media and join our Discord if you've got Discord, and follow me on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, even though there's no current ticket portal, I'll put still like links to the socials and stuff and the Twitch channel so people can find it. But that's great. I'll go ahead and just close this out with some plugs of my own. The show art for Call Me By Your Game is done by Glenn J. You can find him and his other great work on Instagram at Glenn with 2 N's.JAY. The show is produced, edited, and the original music that you hear up top is by Jeremy Schmidt. If you want to give him a tip of the cap, for, all the work he does on the show, you should check out his podcast, Video Games, a Comedy Show. Who knew that? Video games, comedy, they could be in the same place. You can listen to that wherever you get your podcasts. I can be found on social media on Twitter and Instagram at Connor_McCabe, on Blue Sky at Connor McCabe, on Twitch at twitch.tv/consiscool69. And if you're also listening to the show and you love the sound of our voices and you want to see some handsome faces, check us out on YouTube. There's a link to the YouTube channel in the show notes as well. For all episodes moving forward will be available in video. And again, check us out on Patreon. We're over at patreon.com/super NPC Radio. And if you like the conversations I have with people about video games, and you like to hear just bonus content, you've ran the well dry, you need more, there's a bunch of stuff there, starting at $1 a month and more, moving up from there. But that'll do it for this episode of Call Me By Your Game. We will see you on the next one.